With us today, Electoral Commission, Commissioner, Ambassador, Dr. Yusuf Nzibo, Balozi karibu sana nyumbani. Also with the Electoral Commission is the Chief Executive Officer himself, the man behind the scene who does the work, Mr. James Oswago. He likes to keep a low profile. That is James. Also with the Electoral Commission is Desi Karibu, and Immaculate, also here. Immaculate is also known as at the Electoral Commission as the guru of elections in Kenya. We are delighted that they are all here. Ishaq Hassan, the chairman of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Chairman Ishaq Hassan actually told me, I have already put it in our work plan because of the importance of the diaspora, particularly in the United States, that we must come, we must visit with them, we must listen to them. They'll be in Dallas. They go to Los Angeles from here on Thursday. Dallas and Atlanta. They'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they'll also be in Boston, and they'll finish up in Minnesota on the 12th of December.
Actions are done by the diaspora. There is always accusations that there was fraud, either because there was lack of technical capacity or because there was one inefficiency or the other. So in helping us design the system, what are those things that we should be considered in such a manner that this element of perceived fraud is not there? We are mentioning this because it is difficult for the IEBC to replicate the system it has in Kenya exactly outside here. IEBC will have to rely on people on the embassy here and consulates. We may have to rely on consultants and other people who are not full-time staff of the commission, and over which we have no direct and full control. How, in your views, should we do that? Again, with the elections which we do in the country, we have observers. The reason why you have observers is to put in checks and balances. And those observers keep the electoral management body on its toes. They check. They want to make sure that you're delivering on what you promised to deliver. You will not have observers when you're having diaspora voting, but you can have some equivalent of those observers. So the question we have to consider then is, in designing our own, do we want some level of participation by party agents nominated by political parties, some form of observation, and if so, what form of observation? If you're going to use technology, what kind of technology to ensure that the system, the integrity of the system is fulfilled? The other system of diaspora voting is what is called return voting. Return voting is mostly practiced in Israel and South Africa. This is where you go and register in the country, come back, and on the day of the election, you go back there. That is another system. Like I said earlier, and I've repeated myself, we are not saying you go that direction, but it is important to be aware that that is what other people are doing. And lastly, there is the system where you vote in a country like this one, but you're voting outside the embassy. You vote in consulates or other locations within the country. So if you're in the US, you may not necessarily come and vote here. You vote in LA or some other place. And the choice of the location where you vote will be dependent on demographic distribution of the population. Where the people are concentrated largely is where those polling stations will be done. This is good, but it's also complex because it attempts to replicate what happens in the country outside. It has got technical challenges, has also has its complicated and is very expensive. Again, if we choose that, we adopt it. But we adopt it consciously, being aware of what it is required. Connected to that is where you vote in the embassy, in which case Kenyans would come and register and vote where we are now. Question is, do they have the capacity, the technical capacity, the know-how to do that registration? If they don't have it, how quickly can they acquire it? And even if they had that technical capacity, would they have the physical room to do it? If Kenyans were to vote here, would this embassy, the compound itself, would it be enough to serve as a polling station and at the same time carrying out this work? That is a consideration which we must weigh, and that is an issue which we must address ourselves too. A system of diaspora voting that works very well elsewhere is postal voting. In postal voting is where the ballot papers and other document materials are sent to potential voters well in advance. You fill it and you return it. It works elsewhere. But it works in places where the postal services have got higher integrity. Do you think ours has that integrity? So that when we send you a voting material, you fill it here, and you send it to Kenya, and we count and say from US to 3,000, or whatever number. Would you feel that nothing didn't happen? Again, it's also for you to consider that. Lastly, there is the new one, the internet voting. This is done in Austria and Norway very well. And for you in this audience, perhaps that is the best and the easiest. And if you're going to develop regulations that govern this, and it's very good for you in the US or in Washington, what about the Kenyan who has lived in Toronto for all these times? Do we ask him also to, or do we develop a different standard for that? That is also something that we must consider. So there are a number of issues in ending which we need to agree on and which should exercise your minds. Number one issue is the need to involve you as diaspora in designing the electoral process. How do we involve you? Do we form a committee? And how do you constitute that committee? And what is the mandate of that committee? Or do you yourselves form a committee so that you have a representative position on this particular issue? Secondly, there is need to involve you as diaspora, the stakeholders, and political parties in some form of election observation and transmission of results. The Commission can easily sit down and say, this is the technology, this is how the results will be transmitted. And because the Electoral Commission of Kenya has already excelled in electronic vote transmission, we could easily say this is how we want it to be done, because it has worked in the country. But even if we said so, what would be your role in ensuring that you also own it and you also have confidence in it? There is need for us to establish an excellent capacity at the embassy level or within the host country for the conduct of voter education and the actual election. Voter education is important because we have already developed a voter education curriculum which has been adopted by the Commission and which is now well known within the country. That is the standard for voter education in the country. There's a reason why an electoral management body must have a voter education curriculum. There's a reason why. And if you read the Curricular Commission report, it tells you the absence of that caused a lot of harm. There were individuals who went out purporting to be conducting voter education activities when what they were doing was really to popularize ethnic manifestos and things like this. So we have a voter education curriculum. And we would want you in the US, in conducting your own voter education curriculum, to use that one, not yours. How do we ensure that you are not doing in the US what some fellows did in 2007 in the country? How do you make sure that there is uniformity in that? Then there are going to be 6 elections in Kenya: the president, senator, governor, women's representative, county assembly. There are 6. If you are voting from this destination, do you want to vote in all of them? Or do you want to vote only in some? You feel that if you have the chance to vote, you want to restrict yourself to the president, alafu useme tosha? Or do you want the president and the MP, alafu useme up? Or do you have a feeling that because you have a right to vote, you want to vote in all of them? Again, we need to reach some kind of consensus. We need to get some definite opinion from you. We would also need your input on one issue, lastly. And this one I can predict what you're going to say. I had said earlier on that Kenya has got 46 embassies and high commissions abroad. And we had said the Constitution provides for the progressive registration and progressive realization of the right to vote. So the question that I'm posing to you at number 5, and I can predict the answer you're going to give, is where should we start this thing? Should we start in the US?
Of course.
UK?
Of course, the US.
Or should we start elsewhere? But if you are starting in the US, and there are Kenyans living in Tororo and Mbali, and some of them living in Morogoro, we must tell them the same reason that we have started with those in the US because of this. So that when the chairman goes there, they don't throw stones at him. See? So it must also help us have a reason where we are saying, okay, very well, we'll start in this place, but that is the reason why what we're using. And the reason we are providing must be a reason which is acceptable all over the place. I have mentioned the things I've mentioned in order for us to have a guided discussion, to get feedback from you, and to get advice and input from you. I want to repeat what I said earlier on. And I'm repeating this thing for a particular purpose. A member of this audience, a distinguished member of this audience, had a discussion with me yesterday. And what that person told me, I don't want to say he or she because he went case. What that person told me was a reference to some recent write-up in a Kenyan newspaper. And the write-up had suggested that in terms of diaspora voting, people may have to travel back to the country or do other considerations. And the person was livid, furious. How do you dare suggest things like those?
That was me.
And it's me who wrote the article.
Fine, now we know the author and we know the purveyor. But now I think you're aware that it is by way of looking at all the experiences, how they do it elsewhere. So I want to repeat what I'm saying. We are here to listen. Let us not belabor the fact. We are here to listen, but in listening, we have to know what they do elsewhere. We are not bound by it, but we have to know what they are doing elsewhere, and we say, hii ndio yetu. So we continue and follow that one. I will stop there, and I will ask questions, and in answering those questions, I'll be helped by the chair panel.
Nikiomba Mwenyezi Mungu aibariki Kenya yangu, kwa jina la Baba na la Mwana Roho Mtakatifu, amina. Kwa jina la Baba na la Mwana Roho Mtakatifu, amina. Ewe Kenya nchi yangu, ewe Kenya baba yangu, ewe Kenya mama yangu, sitakuacha milele.
Okay, thank you very much, James, Your Excellency, the Ambassador, Kenyans, fellow Kenyans, good evening. Good evening. I'm sorry I have come late for this meeting. I was attending the Kofi Annan conference yesterday. I'm sure some of you may have followed the debate, which was streaming live on some of the websites and the television, and you know the debate on election date was very interesting at the conference. But I wanted to say that apart from what James has added, perhaps just to again emphasize the issue that we have come to do. We have a very strict timetable we're working on. The issue of Kenyans voting, Kenyans in the diaspora voting, is not new. I mean, I was, as the Ambassador has mentioned, I was a member of the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, the Guy Commission, which was the first commission which drafted the first constitution. And I remember we received extensive views from Kenya's community abroad, KCA. That time they used to be called KCA, the Kenya Community Abroad. And they came, and actually they came to the boardroom and presented memorandum to the commission, which was captured by the commission. And it was the first time in the first draft, CKRC draft of August 2002, it was captured that Kenyans living abroad will have the right to vote. Of course, that was not legislated by Parliament, and we had to wait for the Constitution to come into effect for that right to be effected. But let's differentiate two things: diaspora and Kenyans residing abroad. When you look at when you go to the dictionary definition of the word diaspora, it makes reference to the Jews and the Holocaust and those who have been dispersed all over the world after certain events. But when you're talking about Kenyans residing abroad, we are actually talking about actual Kenyans who have got proof that they are Kenyans. There are very many Kenyans who have got other nationalities. So the fact is, as a matter of policy and as a matter of law, you must first and foremost comply with the constitutional requirement for being registered as a voter, which means you must be a Kenyan. If you have been living in the US for the last 20 years or 30 years, and you are a US citizen, but you still have got the legal right to come and claim back your citizenship, you must come back to the embassy and apply for a passport, or go and get your ID card. I mean, you first must become a Kenyan citizen, because the law says that you must be a Kenyan, you must be 18 years and above, you must be of sound mind, and above all, you must not have been convicted of an electoral offense. Those rules apply to all Kenyans, even those living abroad, including those working in embassies. So these are clear-cut rules. And something else that I wanted to just mention is that actually, if you remember last year, before the referendum, prisoners took us to court. Those who were in prison, if you remember, Chimolatewa and the other members in the prison took the commission to court because they're saying that the country is going to vote on a very important document, a constitution. Why are we being denied the right to vote on this document? And the Constitutional Court actually ordered the commission to register all prisoners in Kenya and allow them to vote. It's a very big, it came very late in the day after we had closed the exercise, and there was no money. But we have to do it because there was a court order. It had serious logistical nightmare, but we did it anyway. There were about 4,000, I think 5,000 prisoners we registered. And a few weeks later, following that ruling, Kenyans living abroad also brought a suit against the commission, IIC, seeking similar orders against the commission. But this time they came very late in the day because the referendum was on 4th of August, and the court was supposed to rule on the case